Welcome to Chess News 15. Today I want to take a look at another game from the second round of the Dortmund tournament. And this game is between Gustafsson and Naiditsch. It was a very interesting, very complicated, highly tactical game they played yesterday. And Naiditsch started making some mistakes. He was in the defensive, and I think the position was very difficult for him to handle. And Gustafsson won a really good game here. Okay, let's go through the opening moves rather quickly. It was the Vienna variation of the Ragozin from the Queen's Gambit declined. Yes, that is a mouthful, I know. So far this is a proper Queen's Gambit decline. But now d takes c4 is played here, which is not so standard. And now this gives white the opportunity to build up broadly here in the center with his both pawns. But black immediately puts pressure here on the e4 pawn by pinning the knight and of course attacking it with his own knight. But now white counterpins with bishop g5, so now it really gets very complicated. c5 is played now. Don't ask me about the subtleties of this opening, I really don't know them. Bishop c4 is played. C takes d4 now is played. This of course is attacking the knight, which is pinned. So yeah, white better recapture that pawn. But I suppose one of the points of black's play here is that he can now settle white with the weak pawn here on the c file. It is at quite a high cost with bishop c3 check here, because he is giving up his black squared bishop. Now he follows up with queen a5. This is a double attack against the bishop and against the pawn here. But white now interposes with bishop b5 check, and after bishop d7 he first decides to double black's pawns here. He plays bishop takes f6, and I suppose that move is necessary because there is still the threat here of knight takes e4 also. So bishop takes f6 was played, and now black recaptured. G takes f6. I suppose you wonder, okay, chess is not checkers, right? So I don't have to recapture on f6 immediately. Why not recapture on c3 in between? Well, I think that then black could get into trouble. For instance, after king f1, and now the regular g takes f6, white has a very strong move here, and it is rook c1, attacking the queen here, and also looking to invade over the c file, of course. And now, if black plays queen b2, for instance, then he has indeed this very surprising rook c8, because the bishop cannot take the rook because it is pinned. And yeah, next move, of course, black will lose his rook here on c8. Okay, but then after queen c3 check, king f1, what about bishop b5 check then, you know? So I will just eliminate this bishop that is pinning my bishop here on b7, on d7. Well, then white will recapture with his knight here and attack the queen in two ways. And black still has to recapture his piece here. So he has nothing better than to play queen f6, but then of course after knight c7 double check or a double attack, he is going to lose the other rook here in the corner. So that's the reason why after bishop f6 Naiditsch recaptures immediately with g takes f6, not putting his queen as it were in the mouth of the lion, in the lion's den. Okay, my English is beautiful today. G takes f6. Okay, return to the game. Now bishop d7 check was played. Now the bishop was in danger really, because it was attacked both by queen and bishop. And knight takes c7 was played. Now all these moves, they are theory moves. So I suppose both players could play them quite quickly. Now white castles, and he is saying to black, listen, this pawn here is weak, but if you take it, don't forget that then you will open up this c file, you know, and I will have some pressure, and your king is also still in the center, and I am very nicely developed, and my king is very safe here, and you've got weaknesses here, and maybe you've got a weakness here, so okay, you're welcome to play queen c3, but I would not advise you to do so. And of course black doesn't play like that. He plays very safely here. He plays a6. This is probably aimed at preventing a possible knight b5 jump. And now white starts looking for the initiative here. He plays rook b1 and attacks the pawn on b7. Now of course black cannot allow this white rook to come into b7, so now he retreats the queen and protects the pawn on b7. So materially the positions are equal, but I think I would prefer to play white here. That has to do with the fact that black's king is still in the center, and that white's development is better. And also, of course, look at this knight. It's very nicely placed in the center, whereas black's rather passive. Okay, and white is now really underlining his advantage with the next move. He plays queen h5, and this is of course a very nice aggressive move to be able to play, because he now hits on this weak pawn here, and he hits on f7, and is of course now threatening to play knight takes e6 because of the pin of the f pawn. So now black really has to start playing very carefully here. In the game he plays king e7, and that is a very, how to say, that is a move with far-reaching consequences. Yes, I think probably the best move for black would have been to play knight c5, improving the position of his knight, protecting first and foremost the pawn on e6, so that knight e6 is no longer a threat, but also protecting this weak pawn here, and in general improving the position of the knight, and preparing, and that's probably the most important thing, to castle queenside. And then I'm not so sure if white has something significant here. Also, of course, the knight is now looking sometimes to take the pawn on e4, so I think this would have been a more flexible approach, and try to prepare castling queenside. Anyway, Naiditsch didn't play like that. He played, as mentioned, king e7, and now, you know, this is a middle game type of position. There is no endgame in sight, so this king will be in some kind of a storm for at least another 10 or maybe 15 moves to come. And it looks natural, you know, to play like this, because in a way, yeah, it connects the rooks, of course, and this king maybe feels very cozy just around his 3 pawns, and they are not just protecting him, he is also protecting his pawns. But the knight still remains passive here, and last but not least, it's not flexible in the sense that the king just has to stay here in the center. Okay, so now Gustafsson is really putting on the pressure here. He is playing f2, f4, and he is toying with the idea of playing e4, e5 in the near future. And this means that black's pieces have to keep an eye out for that possibility here. So probably at the moment it is not a threat yet, but it also means that these pieces have to stay where they are right now. And of course, if white could play e5, then he would break up all these black squares here around black's king, and maybe he could also force access for his rook all the way down the f-file and have a combined attack here on the f7 square. Okay, now if black tries to improve the position of his knight now, we can see immediately, for instance, that e5 is a strong move. Because black has let go of the pressure on e5. So that's not a very good idea. But on the other hand, it is also very difficult to suggest a good move here for black, because white has several options to try and improve his position, but black doesn't really have any good moves to play here. So that probably explains why he thought, maybe now it is time to take the pawn on c3. Because, you know, white has moved his pawn up here, so he has also weakened this diagonal towards his king, which means that I'm threatening to take the knight here on d4 with check. So there is no time for white here to play e4, e5, right? And that is true, but also the queen is vulnerable here on c3, and the c file is now completely opened up, and of course this pawn is no longer protected, so there are some drawbacks to this pawn snatching. Now white played rook fd1, just protecting the knight, so now really threatening to take the pawn here on b7. And Naiditsch now makes another mistake. Well, mistake is maybe not the best word, to be honest. But he plays the less tenacious move. I think the best move here would have been to play queen e3 check. And then we get to see a very, very interesting combination. King h1 would follow then. And then I think the best move is queen takes e4, just eliminating the possibility of a future e4, e5. But now white has a fantastic blow. In this position, I'm not sure if Gustafsson saw this. He can play the amazing knight f5 check. Now, let's first look at a simple capture like e takes f5. Then of course white has rook e1, winning the queen and probably the game, because this king still remains out in the open here, and he's got so many weaknesses here that I suppose the combined power of rook and queen against black's position would win in the end. But after knight f5 check, queen f5, white has another very fantastic blow. He now creates access to black's king with an exchange sacrifice. He plays rook d7 check. So king d7 is forced, otherwise it would be mate on f7. And now you can see what's going on. The queen now has access and can chase the black king. King d6 could follow, for instance, and now the combined forces of rook and queen leave black defenseless. Queen d7 check, king c4. There are several alternatives here, but this is one of the ways for white to win, and one of the ways for black to lose, of course. Now look at the combined power. Now both heavy pieces are... Yeah, where are you? Come on. Yes, are looking at the 5th and 6th row, and now black's king has to come down. And now white really starts chasing here. King e3, now queen b6, forcing the king to come down even more. Rook b2 check, king d3, rook b3 check, king e2, rook e3 check, king d1, queen d4 check, and everything goes with the check, you know. And you can just see how helpless these rooks are here. They cannot protect their monarch, and also the queen here, you know, is really only defending like a bishop. But white's pieces, they can just maneuver around it and deliver the final mating blows. Queen c3 check, king b1, rook e1, king a2, and after rook a1, it is checkmate. So this would really have been a very fantastic end to an already very interesting game. But after rook fd1, Naiditsch did not play queen e3 check, and so on and so on. He played rook a b8. Now, of course, this protects the b7 pawn, but it is also quite a passive move. And yeah, it also introduces certain tactical patterns. Can you see now that this guy here, and this guy here, and this guy here, they're all on black squares? can you imagine what would happen if white's queen sometimes were to appear on e5 and indirectly hit all of black's pieces, especially if he has a discovered check with knight f5, for instance. Okay, so that is indeed what happened here. White played e5 now, so getting access to these black squares. And now probably the best move was, or the most tenacious move was, to play rook hd8 to keep the queen here for the defense of the c-file. And this is just because of a tactical coincidence. But then white could play rook b3, chasing the queen, and then give a check here on f6. And after knight f6 we see the aforementioned queen e5 with all sorts of threats now to the king and the heavy pieces. But at least in this position black could sacrifice the exchange and finally get rid once and for all of this terrible knight on d5. So at least he could play here rook takes d4, queen e4, rook d4 and rook d5. And at least he has managed to reach an endgame in which he has one pawn and a knight for the exchange, but where of course white is heavily the favorite for winning this position in the end. Okay, so he didn't do that. He did play e3 check. And then after king h1, rook hd8 was played anyway, but really a move too late now. Because now white also takes on f6, just as we saw in the previous variation, but now black cannot recapture with his knight on f6 because of another tactical blow. Rook b7 check, rook takes b7, and now we see why it was important for the queen to stay here and to protect the c6 square, because now white can win with c6 check, mating in 3 moves. So that is why queen e3 check and rook hd8 was all just too little, too late. Okay, let's return to the game, where after e takes f6 check, Naiditsch probably realized that in this position he cannot take with the knight, so he has to play king e8. Mind you that after king f8, white has another beautiful win with knight f5, and if black takes that guy, then rook takes d7 lures black's rook to d7, where it simply is in the way of black's king, and after queen takes h7, it is going to be a mate in 3 moves. There is just no defense, and all because of this rook being here blocking the way for black's king. Okay, so Naiditsch also saw that. You have to give him credit for that. So after e takes f6, he didn't go to f8, no, he went to e8. But then of course he was in the pin again here, and now Gustafsson could play knight takes e6, but at least now he has the counter knight takes f6, attacking white's queen here. But after knight c7 check, so saving his own knight, which was on pre by the f-pawn, with a check on black's king, and after king e7, queen h4, Naiditsch finally resigned. The threats are just overwhelming. One of them is of course to play rook e1, winning the queen. Another one would be to play knight d5 check, winning the exchange at least. And look at this knight and this king, they're just horribly placed. And this guy here is also not attributing to the defense at all. So yeah, very understandable that Naiditsch had had enough and resigned in this position. So that ends our discussion of a very interesting, very difficult, highly tactical game. I suppose that you guys should look at knight c5 if you want to check out if that was really an improvement, because this keeps some flexibility in black's position. At least he has the chance to castle queenside, and then I'm sure that he would not have had so many problems as in the game. I also pose a question mark by this opening in general, because yeah, if black has to play like this, you know, with the weaknesses, anyway, it wouldn't be a favorite opening of me to play like this. Okay, enough said. I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something from it. Please, until next time, bye.